Hey guys, so what's been happening over this week? Well, I thought we'd have a bit of a discussion on finding your perfect color scheme. You know, it's something I think we all end up doing at some point in our journey and in this hobby, and we go looking for that perfect custom scheme. You know, our own scheme, something cool that we come up with for an army we've got, or whatever game system you're doing. And I think it's a fun topic to talk about, and it's something that we all end up doing at some point. You know, looking around at color schemes and trying to come up with our own our own version or something slightly unique for something we're doing. It's a cool thing to do in the hobby. So yeah, I thought that'd be a cool discussion for us this week. And while we do that, I thought I'd paint this Harlequin Solitaire here in my custom scheme. You know, my perfect scheme for Harlequins. You know, and I like the purple and so on. So we're going to be doing that. I've got a number of other videos on the channel if you're interested in this color scheme. I've done a few of them now, so that's pretty cool. But now we're going to do the Solitaire. So I thought it'd be good while we have this discussion and just have a bit of a chat about finding your perfect scheme and some of the pros and cons to that, and in the benefits and so on. So I think that's really cool. All right, so let's get started, eh? So yeah, finding your perfect scheme. Well, I think it's a thing that we all go down that journey at some point in our hobby life. You know, we look for that scheme. At least if you're into the painting side of the hobby and that sort of thing, and you generally sort of interested in it, you will start to look at that as a way to personalize. Now, I've talked about these sorts of ideas before in terms of personalization and that sort of thing, and that's often where it comes from. Your sort of desire to find the perfect scheme. But it's a fun journey going there. So we're going to go through a little bit of that and some of those sorts of things that you go to look for that scheme, and then the kind of the arriving at it and so on. I think it's a cool little journey to go on, and it has a lot of upsides. You know, there's a learning experience that goes along with that journey before you come to the scheme, and there's a learning experience after while you're doing the scheme. You know, and it's a really great thing. So I mean, where would we begin? Well, the first thing is coming to the idea of like hunting for that scheme or looking for it, and that initial spark or that initial idea, and where does it come from, and how do you come across that? Well, as I alluded to, it's a personal choice that comes about through your experience in the hobby, and that leads you to these sorts of ideas and looking at paint schemes and that sort of thing, like looking at these videos on my channel or any other YouTube channel or other social media platform that has hobby content that you might be looking at to find inspiration for your own painting or learning experience as you go with your painting, and those sorts of ideas start to come up more and more as you're going down that path of learning. And so you get that idea yourself that you wouldn't mind doing your own thing, or you might have already come to that and now you're actually searching on that journey. You're searching for the color scheme or for ideas on the sorts of color schemes that you want to see for your own minis, and so you go through that way. So yeah, I think the place where we begin is that initial spark, and it comes from a desire to get better at painting. Basically, that's usually where it begins. You're trying to develop your skills and dig more into that, and that coincides with the gaming experience. Maybe you have interest in the lore, that sort of thing, and you start to sort of combine those things. I spoke about the classics in a previous video in this series, and how the paint scheme can sort of infer the narrative or the lore or some sort of conversation about the world that these minis are in, and that can obviously often tie together. And that's true of also a custom scheme, your own personal scheme, and a desire to sort of link that to some idea you have. And so this is definitely where it begins, I think, for a lot of people. There's obviously many other ways that it can start, but these are, I think, pretty common ones. Those sorts of desires for either painting or connection to lore or as part of a sequence of events that draws you to looking for paint schemes because you might have done something in the past and now you're looking for something new or fresh, and you go down this journey. So however you come to the idea of it, whichever sort of influence that brings you to the idea of, I want my own personal scheme, what does that journey look like, and where do you find those inspirations? Well, as I said before, it could be a YouTube channel. You might have seen one of my videos, for instance. I do a lot of custom schemes. You might see something cool there that you like. You might cherry pick one of those ideas. or use it wholesale, whatever. But it could be a number of sources, and often that's where it starts to come into it. And I've spoken to other people, in person when people have asked me for inspiration or ideas on schemes or things like that, or just general painting questions. And something that comes up a lot if you're engaged in more, I guess, more traditional art practices. One of the things that you do is you generally build an inspiration board or a mood board or something like that. And what is that? Well, it's basically a collection of images, usually, sometimes writing and other things, but mostly it's images, and that gives you a sense of the thing you're trying to create. This is especially true of things like concept art and designing characters and things like that, or places or landscapes. You'll have a whole range of images that help you kind of get an idea about what you might like, and that's definitely true for custom schemes with miniature painting. Often you might put together a bunch of images or things that you like and try to pick out that color scheme from that. And that's often where you'll find that scheme, because there's usually going to be commonalities or threads through that help inform that scheme, and you'll start to see it. And and there are actually a lot of sort of products and things out there to help you with this sort of thing, where it gives you like a mood board or an image, and that directs you to a set of colors. You get that in art a lot, but you get that in our miniature hobby too. There's a number of people out there, I'm sure we all know who they are, that release these sorts of products, many influencers and so on, and they have those sorts of products that they release that are inform you for painting. So there are a lot of aids, gaming like hobby aids or gaming aids that sort of help you along the way for this sort of thing, but you don't really need any of that to do it. You just need basically an internet connection and a computer to find yourself a bunch of images that help you to derive that scheme from. And it might not even be images, that's one good way to do it, but also it can just be images of miniatures themselves. So rather than art or other images, it's actually the miniatures that help inform that, and that's another way that you then sort of find it. And this rabbit hole that you go down is a vastly enjoyable one, and can take days, weeks, months, or even years to finally come to the decision as to which one you'll choose. And there's a bit of that sort of paralysis for choice, right? You sort of get sort of in this stun-locked kind of zone where you just keep looking, and that is I guess we'll talk about that more, maybe one of the downsides of this sort of journey. But for the most part, it's a pretty fun experience, and you get to see a lot of cool things, and you get to come up with what you reckon will be pretty cool for your minis. So yeah, that's one aspect of it. And the other place that you're finding it from, as we just talked about, is potentially the lore, or even lore that you make up. So you might have a particular story in mind, or a narrative that you're trying to link your army or faction to, or custom faction, let's say, something like that. And so this is obviously very true of things like custom, like Space Marine chapters often have this. You've sort of developed a little lore behind it, and that informs the colors, right? And the colors have a bit of a conversation with that lore, and so in your head you're kind of building this canon that incorporates a color scheme, and that's how you sort of develop that color scheme from that. And that's a really fun one as well, because for a lot of people, the lore and the story of these games, especially Warhammer, but any miniature game that you're in generally has some kind of lore attached to it, and so you start to develop your color scheme through that experience of digging into that lore, and that's a super fun way to do it, and often implies a set of colors which you may not come to otherwise without that story or lore or narrative attachment, or even the one that you develop yourself. You get to the colors through, I guess, words at the end of the day, which is a fun way to do it, and often that can be the right path for you, or it can be a combination. But yeah, definitely lore is a great one, and if you're stumped on ideas about where to begin, that's often a really good place, especially if you're doing armies like in, let's say, Warhammer 40k, you got Space Marines or something, one of the major factions that has lots of sub factions and custom schemes and that sort of thing, or at least a lot of leeway for that type of narrative in the game, where you have these sort of unique chapters, and that's your space, that's your creative space to go ahead and come up with your own. And you know, many games have this, and even if it doesn't, you can certainly just do that yourself. You know, you just literally just come up with it. Like when I've done any of those videos on Marvel Crisis Protocol minis, you know, where I've done custom schemes on those. Now those obviously in Marvel Comics, the superheroes have, you know, variant costumes that they wear. They don't just have one, they have many. So it is in the lore that they have variant schemes. But when you really diverge from that and do your own one that's quite unique, that's a little bit outside of the canon of some of those Marvel characters. And not all of them have variant costumes. Most of them do at some point in their life cycle. They get a redesign and a new costume. But not all. Some stay really rigid to a very specific set of colors and design language that never really changes through those different comic book you know, eras. That they can stay very, very static for quite a while. But there will be changes, and so but you can do it there too. You know, it doesn't really matter. You can do it in Star Wars. You can create your own custom schemes for those minis in Shatterpoint, whatever it might be. So yeah, that's I think the real big ones are like either you're building or at least the fun journeys, or either you're looking for inspiration through art and other images and creating a mood board or a way in which you can develop a set of images that sort of inspire you to come up with a scheme, or develop or actually cherry pick the colors from those artworks or from those things, or a collection of images to do with miniatures, you know, videos like mine, etc. Those sorts of things where you're then finding like the actual schemes on the miniatures or recipes for them, and then developing your color scheme from that. So, or it could be a combination of those. I think those are like the really fun ones to find your scheme. There's obviously probably others, but I think those kinds of main ways of developing that scheme are definitely the ones that most people will end up going down. But if you've got some others, feel free to put them in the comments. That'd be great to hear how you developed your scheme. If that varies from anything that I've said there, that's great. And yeah, but I think that's a really fun one. So, you know, now we'll talk a little bit about, I guess, the cons of this, and then maybe, we'll talk about the pros first, maybe some pros of this, and then the cons, and see if there is any. Usually with a lot of these topics, I find it very hard to actually come up with any cons, but there might be one there, I don't really know. But usually creative pursuits generally are pretty positive to people and don't really have very many negative sides. So it's going to be hard pressed to come up with a counter argument to doing your custom scheme. Maybe there's something there, I don't really know. Maybe peer pressure or something, I don't know. You know, if you've got a lot of purists there that like to see the models in exactly the right color, there might be a negative there. But nothing inherent for yourself anyway. Maybe from another person, but not within yourself. But we're going to try anyway. I'll see how I go with this argument. But yeah, we'll have a look at some of those main pros there, and then we'll come into some cons. So I guess the really big pro to finally getting to your color scheme is that it's something personal, right? That's like the first big one, is that you're going to be way more attached to it, because maybe not, maybe the more accurate scheme you might more attached to, I don't know. But you know, if you've really gone to the effort of like coming up with your own scheme, yeah, I think that has a pretty personal and close connection for you, and I think that's a really fun you know, positive of this experience, and one that really doesn't cost anything extra. You know, you're pretty much going to be buying the same kind of number of paints. There's not really going to be a massive difference there, variance in cost of paint that you're choosing, because you need to buy paint anyway. So there's not a massive difference there. So on the whole, it's relatively cost effective to do this sort of personalization. You know, conversions and more elaborate things like that require a little bit more money and time and that sort of thing. So there's a bit more heavier cost. So from a cost point of view, and just generally, it's pretty efficient to get to a personalization with these models just through paint scheme alone. And I think that's a really fun and positive, I guess, pro for this, is that it gives you that at a relatively efficient cost. And so that's really cool. And so you get that sense of personalization and that narrative, that special thing, without really having to spend a lot more than what you're already spending anyway on the hobby. So that's, I think, the main big benefit of doing it. And you know, and that hipster thing of being unique on on the table, right? When you go with all your mates, you'll be the one with the unique color scheme, and that often, turns heads and all that sort of thing. And there's a bit of prestige there about being the the one with the unique scheme, and that's kind of cool too. For some of us, that's a fun thing as well. When you get your models out and that sort of thing, that you get those sorts of looks and wow comments and so on from people that really love the scheme. That's sort of a personal boost to your own ego, I guess. And it's not necessarily a negative. That's a pretty lighthearted positive, really, for the most part. And it's a nice thing when you get those kinds of comments from people. It's fun, right? And that's, I guess, that's in the pro section. I haven't really seen anyone be particularly toxic with their flex of their custom scheme. I don't really see that very much. Maybe there is somewhere there's a situation where that's a con, but I don't know. Maybe there is. I would imagine if there is anything, it's got to be with like purist Space Marine fans, right? That don't want to see those custom schemes on their table. I can see that maybe, but on the whole, it's a pretty positive thing. So they're the main pros, really, is that connection, that personalization feeling, the satisfaction of something unique for yourself, and overall the prettiness of it, right? The actual scheme itself can be a really wonderful thing, en masse, and that's all aesthetically, that's beautiful, and it gives you those sort of positive feelings. And I think that sort of also goads you more into doing it again. It sort of arms you a little bit psychologically, in terms of like freeing yourself from the traps of like only following whatever the canon of the game is, and being a little bit rebellious, I guess, and having a bit more individuality to how you approach it. And that's really healthy. A dose of individuality and that sort of thing is very, very positive in this hobby, and that can protect you from a lot of negative effects of the hobby, sometimes in those peer pressure moments and that sort of thing. And that kind of brings us on to, I guess, the only con that I can see, as I've just been laughing about the purist Space Marine situation, is there might be a situation where you might have a peer pressure thing or something like that might influence you. And I would imagine this is more maybe for the younger audience, in a younger thing where you might have some immaturities there that might come out, but not always young. We've seen in this hobby over the years, decades, adults can act immaturely too. It's not just the younger audience, and so you might have a situation there where that might come up. But it would be it's more around the gaming side, the competitive aspects of gaming, when people go a little bit too far and they might do something that's negative. Not so much, I don't think, in sort of your custom scheme, but you do get some bad behaviors when it comes to competition painting. So in that way you might get it, but we're not really talking about competition painting here, so I don't think that really is a situation that you're going to enter into. I'm speaking more about your army painting and building, your collection and then playing your games. In those situations, I can't really see that happening, but it might. I guess that's the negative. Maybe is that you enter a situation where there might be some sort of negative altercation. I don't know how you would get into that, but maybe there is. But there isn't really a massive deterrent for yourself personally in terms of you choosing this road and going down and creating this cool thing. It really is just a wonderful experience, and it's great for your creativity. So I can't extol the virtues of it enough. It's having one little project on the back burner that's just your little custom scheme, or your little custom army that has your own paint scheme or conversions or whatever, but usually it has a paint scheme attached, is awesome, and you should definitely do it. If you're in this hobby for more than a year or whatever, or it's your first year, any number of years, it's great to have that personalized project that's just for you. I think that's a really wonderful thing, and that's something that you can go back to time and time again. It's a sort of a perennial thing that you can come into and enjoy and find new life there. Because it has something. There's something more meaningful there for you because you chose it. So you're probably more likely to come back to it, even if you're finding a little bit of malaise or a little bit of like worn out feeling from the hobby at times. Something that you chose to do personally and you pick those models up, I think you'll be able to find that reinvigoration for your creativity a lot faster, at least, than, let's say, just the canon or just the main law color schemes, because that's, in the end, although they are really, really awesome and they're cool and we all love them, they are tied to a sort of a mercantile reason for their existence, right? There is a slight mercantile thing there where they're trying to sell you a model, right? That's a product, you know what I mean, on some level, that company's trying to influence you into getting into this thing. You know, we don't really need much encouragement. We love this hobby, and we all know the jokes about miniatures and so on. There's a million memes out there that talk about this. But, you know, when it's a personal scheme, that wasn't designed by, you know, sort of a marketing reason or anything else like that. That was a personal creative reason that you chose. And so, yeah, it has a pureness to it for you and your creativity that the main law scheme can have, but maybe in its inception probably didn't have you in mind specifically when that was made. It's something that you adopt or that you take on board, whereas this one is coming from you. You're choosing it. You know, you're coming up with that, and that can be a bit more meaningful in some ways. So, you know, I'm obviously a big advocate for this. So anything that's personalized or you know, more individualistic for yourself, I'm pro that, you know, because again, that arms you against a lot of the FOMO and a lot of the things that go on in a hobby that prey on us a little bit. And these sorts of practices where you're, you know, encouraging your own sense of self and self-worth within this creative space is obviously very healthy, and I highly recommend that you you know, engage in it, you know, because it's really good for you. So, you know, you'll find yourself being able to you know, find your own way and your own energy and your own kind of you know, build that bubble world for yourself that's really lovely and enjoyable, rather than getting too influenced by outside forces, which on the whole may or may not be to your best interest, you know, or to your benefit at large. And we all know what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I think overall that it's pretty positive, and I definitely recommend it if you're thinking about doing this sort of thing. Go for it. You know, keep the project small. So we'll just have a little bit of a comment on size of project, right? Because I didn't really talk about that. But, you know, you might start off, if this is your first time doing a custom scheme, you know, what are some of the best practices, I guess? Well, the first one is, you know, I wouldn't pick something too elaborate if it's your first time doing this. Try to pick a scheme that's, you know, a couple of colors, or it has a particular, you know, sort of gimmick, like here with my Harlequin scheme. It's like a blend on a particular material surface, like a cape. You know, so a lot of my color schemes are relatively neutral for most of the other colors, blacks and things like that. And there'll be like one gimmick color scheme or one gimmick thing, which is the main part of the scheme, which I do, which will be a blend from one color to another or whatever, you know, something like that. Keeping it constrained in some way is a really great way to get it done. So I would suggest a limited palette idea is probably the best when you're starting. So, you know, don't choose the quarter color scheme, Space Marine scheme, you know, the Howling Griffins or whatever, the yellow and red quarter. Probably don't do that on your first attempt. That's probably going to drive you insane. But you know, maybe pick a metallic scheme to start with. Might be an easier one, for instance. You know, that sort of thing. So I think that's probably the main parameters is start off limited palette in something that is achievable and maybe not as big an army as what you might do on your second attempt. Maybe start with a squad or a smaller grouping and see how you feel about it. And obviously do a test model. See how you feel about the scheme, see how it looks when it's done, and then move forward with the color scheme once you're really happy with the colors and you've done your tests and it's within the scope of something that you can achieve. And then you'll have much more opportunity for success to actually get it all done. I think they're the main sort of parameters for getting this done and getting it successful, is that, you know, choosing something that's within your parameters and isn't too elaborate, you know, as a limited scheme is a great way to start, and then building on that from there. And I think that's a good way to begin it. So I think I've waffled on enough on this, and I think that's pretty cool. And now let's go and see how I've gone with this Harlequin and see if I've enjoyed the process. But yeah, I think it's a fun thing, and I don't think I will have not enjoyed it because I've already done a few of these, and we'll get my closing thoughts. And there we go, one Solitaire, all done. Let's take a look. So yeah, this was fun. This is like another character to add to the collection of these little Harlequin minis that I've been painting on the channel over the last, I guess, what is it now? Maybe a couple of years now. I don't know, but we've got a few of them now, and I think this is the last in like the actual character models. So I guess next we'll probably maybe try one of the units or one of the vehicles or something like that. The little jet bikes that these guys ride. That'll be pretty fun. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. That's really cool to add him to the collection. I think that's awesome. Hopefully he doesn't get legended. Maybe I'll get a chance to use him in a game or something like that. That'd be pretty fun. But yeah, I thought I'd just have a bit of a chat on the whole finding your perfect scheme. And I hope you've enjoyed this chat. And as I find my perfect scheme for these Harlequins, I think it comes up pretty cool. I think that doing a whole squad of these will be fun to see what it actually looks like all together. And I haven't actually done a group shot yet of the ones that I've already painted, so we'll definitely have to do that sometime in the future as well, just to see how it all looks and see if this really is the perfect scheme for Harlequins, or at least for me anyway. I think it will be. They should look really nice. I can imagine the jet bikes and so on with the black and the sort of the desaturated bone there would look pretty nice, I think, on those jet bikes. So yeah, anyway, if you want to see videos like that, put them in the comments and let me know, and I'll see about organizing something like that in the future. Come up with a nice topic and we'll have a chat, and I'll paint one of them up. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll leave a nice image for this one at the end, as I normally do, in the paint list. But I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit the like button, subscribe, it really helps me out. And I guess I'll catch you on the next one.